What's good, guys? I thought I'd start this episode on. It's an inside joke, guys. So we know we've had some few comments about how Cockin introduces himself, so we thought we'd just have a few laughters with that. But yeah, we're back today at the Word of the Street, and we're going to talk about depression. This is part 2, like we promised, and this time we'll be focusing more about the cultural and ethnic side of depression. And I'm joined here again by Adrian.
What's up?
Andrew.
Peace.
And Cockin.
What's good? It's my thing, you know.
And we know. So guys, all of us here are not, we have British citizenship, but we're not natives of this country, right? So yeah. Adrian is from Romania, I'm from Rwanda, Andrew's from Malawi, and Cockin is from Uganda. So we're all immigrants to this country. Mm-hmm. And the other day I was reading an interesting stat, and it said that immigrants and ethnic minorities are twice more likely to suffer from depression than natives. So the question I want to pose out to begin this discussion is, what do you think about that, and why do you think that comes about?
I think it's quite a tough one. But if I'm to pin it something, depression is not something that's necessarily talked about a lot, especially in the ethnic minority group. And I was reading some papers or some facts, kind of see what the figures are, and they said in 100,000 people in like the Western world, about 151 people seek mental what's called
health guidance.
Yes, mental health guidance. And in Africa, that number drops down to 14 people per 100,000 people. So you can see that it's not like a big topic there, or if it's there, it's not really discussed that much or encouraged. People are not encouraged to go and seek for help if they're suffering from it.
Yeah.
So that could be one of the reasons.
The statistic you said, was it
twice more likely
to be diagnosed or
to experience depression?
All right, I find that interesting with your fact, especially if people find that they're not talking about it or not even going to clinics in the first place to be diagnosed. Maybe the numbers are even higher, like people who aren't even being registered. And I guess that comes down to, and I think we spoke about depression being a multi-factor thing. Mm-hmm. I think when you have migrants in a different host country, the society factors build up on why they may experience those things, or their lack of access to treatment, cures, as well as just cultural stigmas, perhaps.
What do you think? I want to hear especially from you, because obviously 3 of us are from Africa, so we're speaking from an African perspective. But from an Eastern European background, how does that, when you hear this stuff, is it similar?
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me that immigrants do experience depression twice as just, you could say, native people. And, you know, just the fact that when you're trying to integrate into like a new society, and when you don't know how to react to certain things, you know, the fact is your whole persona is different from those people, and you're trying to, I think, integrate yourself, be more like them, and not standing out. But to be honest, at the beginning, you kind of do stand out. Maybe not later on, but at the beginning you will. You'll feel like a bit of tension, probably. I definitely did. And I'll tell you, well, I came here young, so I can tell you that at the beginning, I did not feel this effect as much. But once I was in secondary school, there was a difference between me and the other students, just because once you start telling them, oh, well, I'm actually not from Scotland, even though I was acting the same as them, I had the same accent, you couldn't tell that I was like an immigrant. But once you start to tell them, I think they view you as just a little bit different, you know?
As an outsider.
Yeah, you could say so. And I can say that I definitely did get a little bit bullied just because of this. And, you know, still looking back, this, I can still feel or I can still, I don't know. I feel like I'm still there, you know. Them saying the things that they were saying to me back then, I can.
You still feel like you're still recovering from it.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, if I can just to touch upon that brief, if I can give a brief. In the last episode I talked about, I said that depression can start at a young age. And I gave an example of where somebody experienced depression when they were like around 12, 13. And, you know, I began to reflect a bit since then about my own personal life. And I mean, when I first came to this country, there was so much pressure. I spoke zero English. And I came here like in August, and school was about to start 2 weeks later. So I had to learn English as fast as I could. And it's a shame because I've forgotten some of the languages that I was so fluent in. But at the beginning when I went to school and everything else, people were just, I don't know if they were making fun of me, but even when I grasped English, I tried to fit in, and I used to, you know how the Scottish people speak. So instead of, I remember when my friend asked, can I go to the bathroom? And then instead of me just going to the teacher, I would be like, me too. I was like this, me too. Like trying to sound a bit more Scottish and to be because I wanted to feel like I was being accepted, I was a part of society. But I'm now about 10, 11 this time. It doesn't really bother me. I didn't think anything about it. Then I go into high school. I think in high school that's where things I started to realize, especially upon reflecting back and in hindsight, that's when I started to realize how much of a mental issue or struggle it had or effect it had on my mind, especially from a depression perspective. I was in school, right? Many people when they see me now, they say, Benjamin, you're very confident. You come across as very confident. But there were times where that confidence, I used that confidence as a mask. Of course. As a mask to hide behind my true emotions. So I used to get asked certain questions because I did not know things from the British background or the Scottish background, and people used to make fun of me for it. They used to make fun of the way I talk, and yeah, I used to sometimes not want to come to school. So I used to wake up in the morning purposely. Sometimes I'll be like, I'll pretend that I'm ill, so I don't know how to go to school because I didn't want to get made fun of just because I don't speak a certain way, I don't act a certain way, and and being the only, unfortunately, being the only black person in my class and one of at the time 2 black people in the entire year, it was just a madness. And looking back in hindsight, I feel like I know some of the symptoms of depression. People may come across as lazy or because they don't want to do anything, because they're fighting these inner thoughts in their mind. And I was fighting these thoughts. I was like this, I can't fit in. What can I do to fit in? And that was really getting me down. I wouldn't say it was clinical depression, but that's, in hindsight, I feel like that was me beginning to feel the impacts of me being an immigrant, an ethnic minority in this country.
Yeah, I think what you said there in terms of having those feelings, and you don't want to classify them as early signs of depression or early signs, the beginnings of something like mental illnesses. I think that's kind of the struggle that we have as like immigrants, because we come from a culture where, like in Africa anyway, if you say I have depression, it's seen as, for lack of better words, as a white man illness. So that's what I've had. That's a phrase I've read, and I've had people use it. They're like, oh, that's a white man illness, or that's like a white people illness. So there's not so much education around it because they don't believe that that's something they could struggle with. And that takes me back to what I was reading, and it said that in terms of mental health guidance, in terms of mental health teachers and people that can offer mental health services in Africa, there's like 1 person per 100,000 people. And then whereas when you come to like the Western world, that number is jumping up to like about 9 people per 100,000 people. So you can already see that there's more resources available in Western worlds. Like they've taken and invested a lot in kind of educating people on mental health and having the services there available for such people. Whereas back in Africa, since we may still have that stigma, and which is sadly passed on to the children. And although we're here, we still have that stigma that mental health problems are not something you should complain about or you should be experiencing as a person. They always say there's worst problems in the world, so just snap out of it. Stuff like that. So it's kind of difficult, but we need to kind of invest in trying to learn and trying to educate people about mental health problems. And I think once we educate and we start having an open conversation about it, not just on the news or like in your families, in your culture bases, in your communities, then people will start to notice those signs much earlier and seek help much earlier as well. So it's one of those ones, I guess, that you experience.
But what? So, like, yeah, like you mentioned, the Western world has invested a lot into tackling and bringing awareness to mental health issues. From the areas we all come from, it doesn't seem like it's a huge focus. But why do we think there's such a stigma around it? Like, in African culture, in Eastern European culture, why do we think that there's such a stigma around even talking about these things? Like, if I've never heard my parents speak about it. Obviously, they want to, like I said before, they want to bring a show like, parents, they want to show to their kids that they're toughening up, and they want you to grow up in that manner. But that creates a stigma and it becomes generational. But why do we think that?
I think perhaps a part of it might come into, partly how people view us, but also how we view ourselves in terms of ego. You're talking about families that migrate, especially, let's say come to the UK where we are, already have a lot of baggage in setting themselves up, going against pre-existing disadvantages such as healthcare, low quality education, housing, crime rates, especially in the places you find the large groups of these minorities. Those things are already piling up, adding to their mental health issues. But then at the same time, it's kind of like acknowledging that makes an excuse. And these are families from hard-working backgrounds where it's, you work hard. If something's difficult, you work harder. Nothing can't be done without hard work. And so that becomes a whole thing of, it's okay, push everything away and just keep working hard and everything will be all right eventually. And obviously that's a false reality when people get here, and the reality is like, all right, I'm working hard, but my situation isn't changing. And so finding a way to communicate these ideas that they haven't been exposed to or haven't let themselves be exposed to, starting to learn, is a very difficult process for them. It means realizing that not only was I maybe wrong in the past, but there's a better way to do things. Communicating with my children, understanding my experience as an adult perhaps is different from a child coming over who now has this identity crisis of wanting to fit in, like you were talking about, but then you go home and your parents, it's a different culture in your house.
Yeah, they expect you to be something else.
They don't fully understand what you're growing up in. And so all these little factors piling up into this identity crisis, these feelings of isolation, separate from my friends, all piling up and not knowing how to communicate with my parents not how to communicate with my children, and how to communicate with the culture that we're in. We just don't understand how they do it compared to how we do it. And yeah, that stigma is a lot harder to break practically than just speaking about it.
Yeah, you have quite a bit going against you already. Just by the color of your skin being in a different culture, or coming from not even just culture, coming from a different culture into a new one, where you're the minority, you already have so much going against you, and you don't want to add on another factor. I guess it's something that you said as well, touched on, like you don't want to seem weak.
Yeah,
and that's what depression, mental illness, is stuff that makes you seem weak. Anyway, that's literally what I used to think anyway. My mind has been changed since then. Like, it's a problem. It's just like any other illness. You may get sick from from any other illnesses, and depression and mental health is just like any other illness. And just as you may go to the doctor to get medicine, it's just exactly the same way you can do that with depression. It doesn't mean that you're weak. It just means we're all human beings and we're vulnerable. But that's the thing. We don't want to be vulnerable. We don't want anyone to see you as vulnerable. So you need to act as strong. Parents need to act strong in front of their children. They don't want their children to see them being vulnerable, because that's a sign. That could be like a sign of weakness. You don't want your children thinking you're weak. So it's the question will be, how do we tackle that mentality of where we can talk about our mental illnesses, our depression, without having that stigma or that thought that I'll come across as being weak?
Yeah, I would have to agree, just because as you said, especially, I don't know for females, but we can, since we're all guys, males, you never want to seem the weakest out of everybody. You want to stand out, right? And especially in some denominations and cultures, as you mentioned, for example, Africa, where the rate of depression is much lower, it would probably be looked down upon if you did claim to have depression and then you were sharing your feelings, your thoughts, and then them just, the other people around you, just not regarding
Anything you say.
Yeah, exactly. Just like, how can I say it? Shunning you and not taking it seriously. And I think that's the most important or the most serious issue, I would say, because coming from a background where it's seen maybe as shameful, you could say, you are less likely to open up and share what you're going through.
Do you guys think, coming from your background, from the backgrounds you come from, do you guys think, like Andrew mentioned, do you guys think it's had a profound effect on you, that not just when it comes to mental health and depression, do you guys think that it has such an effect that you guys struggle to, I feel like I struggle to share things because, yeah, the culture I was raised in, but also I wanted to ask, like, Adi touched upon it already, we're all guys, as in the male culture as well, like within the cultures, like within like immigration and ethnic minorities, there's also another culture within cultures, like in the male culture. Why, I don't know, it's hard to explain, but why are we so set on like showing this image of like, yeah, we're guys, so we need to be strong.
An alpha male.
An alpha male, right? And then when he starts to discuss, when we come to discussing things,
yeah,
we just never talk about them. Like, I do not think I've ever had a discussion with my male friends about on depression, ever. I've had some discussion with some girls. I don't know if that's an innate thing, or it's just, yeah, the culture, the societal culture of how males are supposed to be, which we shall touch upon in on the next podcast when we deal on that. But yeah, I just want to bring it up. Do you think, what influence do you think that has on being an immigrant, being an ethnic minority, and then piling down on top of it?
I guess not to generalize, but I think majority migrant groups do come from backgrounds where you have these traditional conservative patriarchal structures in terms of the family setting as well as cultural, where, you know, the man is the head of the household, he's the breadwinner, he's the representative and all these things. And it definitely ties into what we're already saying. The idea of being the head of household but also being weak, those two things can't coexist. If you're weak, if you have something that prevents you from fulfilling your function, you can't take care of your wife. You're seen as you can't provide for your kids. If you can't do things for yourself, how are you gonna do this? And so I think the hard part that we're now realizing is, rather than being honest and saying, well, I can't do this because of this, it becomes thing as, well, I can't tell anyone or else they're gonna think, and I really want to take care of my family, so I can't let them know I need to put them first. And maybe it's the whole thing of trying to put other people first in your mind, that I'm gonna make sure everybody else is okay first, and then I'll deal with my issues later. Or feeling guilty for putting yourself first, perhaps, as a man. And yeah, it starts from those ideas and comes down to how we treat each other as brothers in our groups, in our friend groups, you know. There's a kind of ego attached to it, whether we realize it or not, but it's almost like we're always competing to who's going to be the dominant male thing.
It's like the alpha in the chat.
It's like an animal kingdom thing, but obviously a lot less toned down, in a way where maybe we don't realize that what we build actually keeps other people out instead of...
Just as you were mentioning, I wanted to add that apart from the cultures or denominations that maybe deny the fact of, or depression, you know, people going through depression, I think also if you are going through depression, you are somehow meant to deal with it by yourself on your own not share it with others, because then, as you said, you will look less dominant, you will look weak, you're not going to have the same status because you have made yourself vulnerable. So that's something else to keep in mind. And all of this just piling up on one person, obviously, it's not healthy, it's not practical, it's not it's not good. At the end of the day, it's not good. So yeah.
In terms of adding on to Benji was saying, it's hard to share in terms of with the backgrounds we've come at, and I kind of resonate with that, because I'm not necessarily the sharing type. Like, I already have that factor on it. Like, I don't come out just like, oh, here are my feelings. This is how I feel. Like, I would even sit there and be like, I should share this or tell someone, but the person to me will be like, no, don't bother that person. So having that already, and having that other background, the layer of the culture, and like, you don't want to seem weak, even makes it harder to share something. Because I remember a while back when I was just actually going through, I don't know, I was just going through the emotions with stuff like with work, home, all that stuff. I was in a space where I was just feeling confused and just overwhelmed with what was happening. And it's not like necessarily like the world was falling apart, but I just found myself that I was not in a place that I wanted to be in, and that was kind of falling deep and deep on me. And it just sucked the life and the energy out of me. I didn't really want to do anything. And this is like probably the first time I'm sharing this here. So I guess that's a start. And I noticed that although the way I was acting at home was slightly different, like I was not my normal energetic self, but I thought I was, looking back now, I thought in my head I was hiding it quite well. But I knew like my mom would look at me weird and be like, oh, what's like something was right. Like, I could see how she was looking at me, that she was worried about something, and certain questions she would ask and all that stuff was just like, something's going on there. But I didn't, again, even with that, without reaching out and asking those questions, I was just like, I'm fine. I didn't really share, because I just felt like if I was to open up myself at that moment in time, I would just seem like very weak. There's other people with bigger problems than I do. So again, I keep it to myself. But what did help is that even though she noticed that was the case, I don't think she noticed, or whether she realized that I knew this. She got someone to come and speak to me instead, rather than that. Like, they didn't come like probing like what's wrong or whatever.
Directly.
They just came in just to give like a word of encouragement. They're like, yeah, life is this, and sometimes you may go through problems. And she's like, I understand there's like certain pressures at you at home. You need to do this, and you need to look after this person and these people, but the things do get better. So I think sometimes we may not be in a position where people may not be in a position where they're willing to share. But if you do notice someone's character is a bit down and it's not their usual self, it does not have to come and just give an encouraging word to them and just be like, everything will be okay. I don't know exactly what you're going through, but yeah, at least you are there. And that, to me, that one specific moment actually helped me kind of start cracking the shell that I was in. And from there, I managed to kind of bring myself back, because I was just too much into my brain, into my mind, that I was just spiraling down and down and down. The fact that I didn't talk about it was just even sinking deeper. And that is, I guess, a big issue. We need to learn to be more open. And I'm trying. I'm not saying I'm there yet, but I think it's a process.
I think we're all trying.
Yeah.
You know what the funny thing about it is that I spent all my years studying like science, medicine, all these other things to do with the human body and how systems interact. And it's always so fascinating. Recently, I started reading a lot of philosophy. So it's always so fascinating that our deepest struggles are always mental. They're always within ourselves. And that brings me off to, I was reading this article on the BMJ, so that's the British Medical Journal. And I remember we were at Nando's a few years ago. Me and my friends were at Nando's. And I think you were there as well, Colin. You were there, and we were discussing about seeking help, especially like natives, British people, and the Western people in Western culture. They find it I'm not saying they find it easy, but they find it easier to seek help. So they go to a therapist if they need one. Again, I'm not saying that it's easy for them because it's a struggle to reach out to somebody else. But a friend of mine said, and he made a point saying that they would rather see a therapist who was black because they would understand them because they're black. They wouldn't want to go and see a therapist, a British therapist, because they wouldn't understand where they're coming from, because they're, in terms of depression, their depression stems from a cultural background that they can never be sympathized with. So do you guys think that is that a valid point? Or when it comes to seeking help, especially with something as deep as depression, because depression can spiral down into suicidal thoughts, and lots of people have lost their lives. And as we mentioned in the last episode, we know some people have lost their life because of depression. But do you think that's the right aspect? Like, I'm not going to go and see a therapist because, and if I do, I would just want to see something specific, or should we just go and seek help regardless?
That's a difficult one, because on one side you have all therapists are trained and have all the knowledge and the means to give you the help that you need to get, and whether going to one that you can relate to culturally, I think that may add another layer of information or help to what you'll be getting. But I don't know, it's a tough one.
I think, it is tough, but at the same time, it's understandable what they said. I mean, having a therapist from your own background is definitely a plus. But at the same time, we cannot disregard the fact that even though they're not a therapist from your own background or share the same perspective of life, that doesn't mean that they're not good. So you have to keep that in mind, and you can at least grab some useful information from them, and then if the opportunity arises to speak to someone that is more knowledgeable in your own perspectives and background, then you should definitely talk to them as well.
Yeah, I guess I can only reiterate what they said. Definitely having that mutual connection or something, a reference point you can connect to, definitely makes the person going through the therapy not just more comfortable, but more comfortable and more confident in the person. I think it's a lot to do with the person and how they feel. So I don't think it changes the ability of the professional in the position. Maybe coming from their own experience, little things they can give anecdotes to, but again, like you've all said, everyone's, I would hope, is trained to a standard to, even just to, if it's to start the conversation or get to the basics, is better than not having the conversation at all. I think people are lucky where you can live in a place or have resources where these days you can even fine tune who you're speaking to. Like, I want them to have a Christian background and maybe be familiar with LGBTQ resources or come from this place. And I think that's a blessing. And if you have that, do make use of that. But for some people, it's like, this is all we've got. And right now, you need help. Maybe if it's just for the beginning to understand whether therapy is for you, give it a try and maybe see if they can refer you on later on. So I think to start the ball rolling, yes, you won't always have the chance to find someone who specifically caters to your needs. But getting the conversation started is probably more important than that. The luxury. I don't want to call luxury either, to disregard anyone who has that. Yeah. And I do feel bad for anyone who's had a therapy experience and it was completely horrible. Like, they just couldn't connect, or they found the person they were talking to didn't understand them. I think it's a shame where you have that, and maybe people get turned off because of those experiences too.
I think I completely agree, especially in the part where you say that getting the ball rolling and just having a conversation. I think therapists, we've had, I don't know if you guys have been to some of the seminars with a group that we've used to be involved in. Some of our friends, some of our fellow members of the Word on the Street have been involved in it. And they used to hold like talks where somebody would just share about their experiences. And one guy said that going to therapy was he changed the game for him. He struggled with depression, and by going to therapy, he said it was a big step. It was like, imagine that day, right? When you're going to a new school. You're going from primary school into high school. I'm not trying to say they're comparable, but I'm trying to find a way to get us to understand. I was really nervous going from primary school to high school because I'll have to meet new people. There will be some people from my school who go there, but new people, new environment. Taking that step to go to a therapy is much, much bigger than that. And some people struggle with that, but I think it's important that the first step is taken. Therapists are trained to a clinical level that they can help us. And sometimes you just need somebody to talk to, and get things off your chest. And I think, having said that, I think that's what we're not trained therapists here, but I think amongst our friends, we can be that pseudo-therapy.
That first step.
Yeah, that first step that people need. Because I think a lot of problems may not be solved, but we can initiate the steps of solving those problems, or at least controlling some of the issues. We're sorry, guys, for cutting that podcast and episode short, but we know that you guys have enjoyed it and you're having a wonderful time. But we had a massively long discussion, and so we had to break it up into 2 parts. That means there will be a 3rd part coming up for you guys. And so we'll catch you in 2 weeks' time on the next episode.